Everything you wanted to know about marrying traditional marketing with digital marketing. This week on The Core of the Matter, brought to you by Cor Comms. Welcome, I'm Adrian Smith, Managing Director of Cor Comms. We deliver marketing and communications with passion, excellence and trust. We're not talking about a rocky marriage between traditional and digital marketing. We're talking about the two working in matrimonial harmony to deliver reach and frequency to audiences in the most efficient way possible. Today on The Core of the Matter, we're talking to Cor Comms Marketing Director Craig Harding and Digital Media Specialist Trent Arnold about how they build a marketing strategy that uses both traditional and digital media in its delivery. Also, they'll tell us how to adapt television commercials and press advertising content to digital media and why it's important to have more than one creative execution up your sleeve. Before we start off though, it wouldn't be a discussion about marketing without a statistic. This one is from Facebook. Did you know that when you add a paid Facebook advertising component to a TV campaign, it can improve brand recall by up to 33%? So Craig, you've done a lot of this. You've started your career in traditional marketing after studying economics and marketing at the University of Tasmania, and you've been with this business for over 17 years. What changes have you seen over time mixing traditional and digital media?
Yeah, well, I suppose the key thing is the introduction of digital from the outset, given I've been buying media for longer than I'd probably like to remember. The digital in the first instance really was some Facebook components that were added to campaigns when clients started to recognise that this was a media that people were using or starting to use more and more of. And at that point, there was maybe 5 to 10% of a campaign budget was applied to a digital component. And interestingly, over time, that has grown as there's been more digital channels available. The metrics from digital and social have improved, and that was one of the key things that once we started offering digital and social to clients and they understood the ability to understand the impact that the campaign was having through the data, they really grasped that, particularly a lot of government clients who had to report up the line. They were able to go to their managers and highlight how the campaign was tracking and what impact it was having. So as that people became more confident with it and probably just more familiar with it also, we saw the mix getting larger and larger. And interestingly, while there's a lot of talk about digital and social, traditional media, the spend still worldwide still outpaces digital and social. It's digital and socials probably about 46%, and digital and traditional is at about 50-odd%, so or 54%. So certainly that'll probably next year it'll surpass it. Digital and social will. So there's certainly been growth over time, and that will continue. Traditional is probably starting to stagnate.
Great. And Trent, we'll bring you into the conversation. You've got a degree in media from the University of Tasmania. Since coming to the business 18 months ago, what's been your experience in seeing how the two approaches integrate?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of things. Number one would just be the fact that when you're sort of learning social media and digital marketing, you learn the technical skills, but when you integrate the two, you start to understand that there are still core marketing principles that need to be backed up in traditional and social media marketing. So a lot of people consider social media to be sort of a gimmicky thing, whereas understanding customers, ensuring that you really understand your key messaging and all those sorts of key principles of marketing are really important, both for traditional marketing and for social media marketing as well, because they underpin all of it. And then the second thing I think is, Craig mentioned before, the metrics that you're able to get from digital marketing. These days, you're actually also able to underpin some of those same principles and use them in traditional marketing. So understanding things like Google search trends and Google brand awareness metrics just allow you to see the impacts that traditional campaigns have by using digital measurement capabilities. So yeah, those two things integrate really well.
And so how do you guys go about integrating the two together when you kick off a campaign? You might have a flighted approach to television, and you've got to use digital marketing. How do you guys go about that, Craig?
Yeah, well, partly television obviously is quite expensive to be on air all the time over a campaign. So quite often we ensure that the digital and social components fill in the gaps when you might have a flighted approach with television. The stat you said at the outset highlights the benefit of using both at the through a campaign, but certainly being on television, on air for a full campaign is way too expensive in a lot of instances, particularly over campaigns with a long duration. So filling those gaps or ensuring that you have digital and social in those periods keeps the brand awareness and the campaign top of mind as it's rolling out.
Yeah, great. And Trent, how do you see it in your perspective about getting that data that's coming in a campaign, or even when you're in the setup phase? How can you utilise that into the planning for the entire media campaign?
Yeah, so I guess one of the great things about social media and digital marketing is that you get customer insights from some of the statistics. So when you run a Google Ads campaign or a Facebook campaign, you might test different messages or different unique selling points of the brand. And when you get some feedback on which message is resonating best with your audience, you can then obviously take that back, scale that into your traditional media, and then use that for some of those campaigns as well.
And certainly insights that come from the digital and social campaigns, in particular perhaps age demographics which are engaging with the campaign, that can be taken away. And we've in the past had insights of particular age brackets engaging with the campaign that we thought weren't our key target audience. So getting those insights and understandings, we can then go away, and that might then help to form traditional media approach. It might be a different radio station that you might need to be on, because you all of a sudden you recognise that younger audiences are engaging when at the outset you probably weren't aware of that. So digital and social helps to understand that and get that insight.
That's awesome. I could see how that could actually be really useful in PR and not just in marketing, is understanding those insights. So if I can put you on the spot a little bit, guys. So you've been given the brief by the client and you've got, say, $100,000 to spend, and you've got an understanding of your target audience. How do you go? Do you have a preference? Do you start with TV and then radio and then print? When do you bring social media on? Can you just sort of talk a bit of that through? And is that an iterative process as you go?
It's probably the other way around, actually. I think digital and social are probably the first ports of call, given we know a frequency level that we want to achieve. And if we know the target audience and how many there are, for example, if it's a Tasmanian audience and it's 25 to 54, we know how many people there are in that target audience bracket, and we can set up a digital and social campaign that delivers the optimal frequency and understanding what the CPMs or cost per thousand to deliver that campaign, whether it's on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. We can then assess how much budget needs to be applied to that digital component of the campaign, and then so we have a good understanding of how much roughly we need to apply to that area of the campaign, and then what we've got left for the other areas.
Yeah, great. And Trent, so you're given that component to build that part of the campaign up. Can you just sort of step us through the things that you're thinking of as you kick off on that process and discover exactly that approach that you want to apply to the campaign?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing we like to understand is what we determine the market size to be. So, I mean, sometimes we'll look at real world statistics to understand how many people we think fall into a market size, and then we'll go about building a social media target audience that basically matches up and aligns with about the same number of audience that we expect based on what the real world figures are. And then from there, we've got, the audience size, we know what our desired frequency is, and then generally just from having run similar campaigns in the past, we can estimate a cost per thousand or a CPM, and that allows us to determine a budget that generally allows us to run quite effective and cost-efficient campaigns.
And do you find that you've got tools within things like Facebook, Instagram, YouTube that you can call upon to help in that design?
Yeah, especially for a platform, say like Google Ads, the Google Keyword Planner, that's generally very effective. We've used it in the past, and the estimated metrics that it gives you, sometimes they almost replicate it at the end of the campaign. Like it's quite uncanny the amount of data that they do have. And I think the easiest way, though, is generally if we've run a campaign for a client before, we know what their stats have looked like in the past. We can sort of assess if there's any over or under delivery, or if sort of different placements or different creative types work best. And that sort of allows us to form an approach that's actually based on some more solid data based on their actual contextual situation.
And does their existing audience help you in that? So if somebody's a business has got 14,000 Facebook followers, can you use that information and data about their existing followers to find new audiences or find ways to already appeal to those existing audiences?
Yeah, so there's many ways you can do it. Obviously, there's audience insights around a Facebook page, which will give you demographic insights. Then you've also got the ability to use customer databases or customer website visitors to create what Facebook calls custom audiences, which will serve it to the people you have on your mail list. It will serve it to everyone that's visited the website. And then from there, you can create what's called a lookalike audience, which is probably the best targeting option that Facebook has. It generally seems to outperform all other audience targeting options. And what that does is you upload their customer database, and then you create a lookalike audience, which is basically Facebook will pull a lot of the data points from the database, like age, location, demographics, all psychographic information that it understands about them, like what their interests are, and then it will match as many data points as possible to create this separate audience, which is basically an audience that's considered to be very similar to the profile that you've uploaded to Facebook.
And one of the best guides to your future clients is current clients. So it's perfect and as Trent has said it from the outset, understanding that basics of marketing, which that is, that future clients are very similar to current clients, that's a perfect approach to take.
And I guess, you think about and I'll look at you, Craig, because Trent, you're a bit younger than us, but in those earlier days of marketing when, EDMs, sending out an email blast to your customers was a big thing, and that was an asset. So really what people need to be thinking of from what you guys are saying is that if you've got that email list, these people can be found on other channels, YouTube, Facebook, and you can get to them while they're on a different platform.
Correct, and I think that's the beauty of it. You're not using that database to just send emails directly to them. You can use that database that you have to deliver via Facebook or Instagram. So it gives you another touch point because people consume information in different ways. So while an email might be great for one or two, one component of that list, it may not be the best for others, and that's when delivering it through social media can deliver better results.
So that's just another way as well that traditional and social media marketing can actually integrate. So you've got radio campaigns or TV campaigns that will drive people to the website, and then obviously once they arrive at the website, Facebook has the pixel, so the cookie that tracks them, and then obviously you can send follow-up messaging to those people, so you know that they've visited the website. And that's how a campaign can sort of be progressed in terms of its messaging. It's the first level of messaging that gets them interested, and then that follow-up messaging on a cheaper platform like social media allows you to sort of repeat and re-emphasise the important key points of a campaign.
And so is that why when people, listening in would be on a website looking at a particular product and that product comes up in their Facebook feed or an ad comes up for it in somewhere while they're searching on the net, that's that pixel following them around?
Yeah, and I know some brands even get so cheeky with it that they send you a follow-up Facebook campaign that sort of says, hey, I see that you left this thing in your cart. So they understand that this person was looking for X product. They got to the point where they almost purchased it, but they backed out at checkout. So they'll send a specific messaging just to sort of really get you over the line there in that last stage.
And that's really powerful. Like Craig, how much more likely would someone be to purchase once they're reminded that they've left something in their cart?
Well, clearly they're an interested prospect. They've demonstrated interest in the product or the service. So just to kind of nurture them, for want of a better word, I suppose, to that next step can be very powerful. There are a whole range of reasons people may not have checked out. That their boss might have walked behind them when they were sitting on their computer doing the purchase, and they had to move on. So just bringing people back to that point and reminding them, certainly very very powerful. And we know that with retargeting campaigns, the click-through rate is a lot higher than something that's general audience discovery campaigns, because they have already demonstrated a significant interest in the product or service.
Which is a nice segue, and I mentioned in the intro that we talked about how, if you've got an existing television commercial or a print ad, you need more than one execution, don't you, in terms of this? You might have, seven campaigns sort of running within mini campaigns running within the one campaign, if that's the case, if people are in different paths in the buying cycle.
Oh, look, it's certainly, if you're driving anyone to a website, marketing 101 these days, you should have a pixel on your website, because once you've got them to your website, then you can start that cheaper form of marketing. The radio or the TV campaign might be quite expensive compared to a digital campaign. So once you've captured them through that top of the funnel, as we like to call it, approach with television, then you've got them, you've captured their details and can follow them up on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn using the pixel approach.
And Trent, can you, as somebody who's come into a marketing agency like Cor Comms, where a lot of it is traditional, there's a lot of TV ads made, press ads, radio ads. Can you sort of talk about how you would sort of grab those assets and start weaving them into a social campaign?
So I think one way that we've sort of tried to evolve our offering is creating more contextual content for different platforms. So there's obviously Facebook feed placement, there's story placements. Sometimes it's easy, to grab your TVC and run that one on Facebook and then run it in a story placement. But being able to actually create content that's specific or tailored to the platform just makes it much more effective than running the TVC on all different platforms in 3 different variations. So some of the stuff that we've been doing is sort of creating content that's sort of specifically tailored for the Instagram story placement. It might be a 5 to 10 second cut down of that 30-second TVC, and it just it's really much more natural for the audience on the other end. It feels less like an ad and more like some content that they're going to consume while they're scrolling through their feed.
And when I'm chatting to people in the real world at a barbecue or at the pub, they're talking about how, I think Facebook's going to die because I just get so much rubbish in my Facebook feed. But when it's contextual, it's different, isn't it? You're sort of getting them at their weak moment. Is that how you see it, Craig?
Look, I suppose the key thing is what people are receiving is relevant to them. Once upon a time, people get bombarded with advertising that is of no relevance whatsoever to them. But I enjoy playing guitar, and I get Facebook ads because I've visited certain websites for a new guitar. Much to my wife's disgust, and so it's the ability, I suppose, to serve advertising that's relevant to somebody. So people are obviously more likely to be engaged with it, as opposed to something that's totally not relevant to them whatsoever. So I think as you said that Facebook might be dead. Certainly, if you're getting information and advertising that's relevant to you, then people are more likely to engage with it, which means it's definitely not dead.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was just say, I think one of the reasons that people go on social media, or Facebook in particular, would be to consume content, so news, funny stories, videos about certain things that sort of will educate or inform them or engage them. And one of the keys to advertising is to make sure that you actually play to that. So you need to make sure that the content you're creating doesn't come across as a salesy ad, because that's sort of what people will tune out a lot of the time. So if you can create advertising material that, feels contextual, feels natural, it feels like content that they're consuming rather than an ad that that's being placed in front of them, that's one way that you can kind of break that or pattern interrupt in a way. And that's sort of how you can use those social media channels and create content in a contextual way to serve it to them how they want to be served, I suppose.
And I guess this will be for another podcast, but it's about that creative execution and how you take that campaign big idea, and it's just not about the TVC anymore. You can't just say, "Yeah, we've got a TVC, we'll just put that on and play that out," because the numbers will tell you in social media when people are switching off from that, and you need to find that other way. So a really good campaign, I guess, is that one that you can get that creative execution and run that all the way through the people as they go through the funnel to purchase or register or whatever that call to action is.
And there are some minimum requirements to update material for social. For example, a lot of people view things with the sound turned off. So just the need for subtitles on the screen or key points that are being spoken about to be put up on screen, particularly for social media or Facebook in particular. YouTube not so much because people are there to watch videos, so they have the sound up, they're in the kind of video watching mood, so not such a requirement to update material in that respect in terms of subtitles. But certainly it still needs to be less salesy and more informational. It's giving them something. It's an insight or some kind of additional information that might help them. If they're a sailor, for example, it might be something that's offering insights into how to become a better sailor. But clearly, it's from a product or a service that's looking to sell eventually.
Yeah. And so, like, the TVC is obviously not dead, and we still use it really effectively in our business. But what other measurements can we use now so we know that if we've got a radio ad that's sending somebody to a website, can we measure those things back now?
Yeah, well, certainly TV isn't dead, and certainly over the COVID period, we recognised that when so many more people were watching television, the numbers for the local news, Southern Cross TV was sitting close to 100,000 viewers, which is 1/5 of the Tasmanian audience. So marketers who had that insight were probably scrambling to potentially get on air because TV does give you significant instant reach and frequency, and in an engaging way as well. There is research to highlight that videos seen on TV, people have greater recall than compared to them being on social media. And perhaps that's because TV is such a narrow focus medium where if you're on socials, you've probably got other stuff going on around it and you're not as focused as sitting there watching TV. So no, look, back to your point, Adrian, it certainly isn't dead. And it's probably not as targeted, obviously, as social media can be, but when you want broad reach and instantaneous reach, that's where it certainly kicks goals and helps to deliver something to a broad audience. And then that's where social comes in, and you can narrow those broader audiences with specific messaging. Great.
And certainly catch-up TVs are absolutely a part of that mix now, isn't it?
It is, and that's, the way you can use that is there might be certain types of programming that you're interested in targeting. So it might be home renovation type programs because you have a certain product that aligns with that, so it's contextually based. But also you can target by demographics because it's in essence it's digital. So and it's because it's done through the internet, people know the users' media habits as a result of that.
And so, with radio now, I believe there's some products coming into the market from radio stations where you can actually get a bit more of an understanding of what sort of web traffic your ad is creating.
Yeah, that's right, Adrian. This has just recently arrived in Australia from the States, and it's basically a product that's linked to the back end of a company's website into Google Analytics, and it tracks web traffic in a 7-minute attribution window, which follows the ad being played. There's research that highlights that 7 minutes following a radio ad being played is when people are most active in searching that, and so therefore you get some analytics in terms of what kind of spike in traffic may have arisen from that in that 7-minute window, and if it's happened in that 7-minute window, then you're pretty confident it's the radio ad that has actually driven that. But there's also, that's an actual setup requirement where there's integration with Google Analytics back end. But it's not to say you can't do it yourself through something like TV advertising. If you know when it's on air, it's just a matter of, schedules are set in stone generally. So your ad's on at 7:30 on a Friday night. It's not difficult to go into your Google Analytics and assess what kind of traffic it was spiking at that point.
Great. And another traditional, very traditional type of marketing and communications is digital is PR and can be woven into the digital space. Trent, just a lot of campaigns also have that PR component to it, that news type component. Can you talk a little bit how you can weave that into it with paid social media marketing?
Yes, I think I mentioned it before. One of the goals or one of the aims or one of the reasons that people use social media is for that content. A lot of people do use it for news. I think that news ranks as the third most common reason that people go on Facebook. So I think obviously the first one is sort of to connect with friends. The other one is sort of to get information, and the last one is sort of to read, or to be educated or to be involved in that sort of way. And then the third one I think is news. So obviously people are really interested in consuming content, and when you've got content to create, you can obviously put it out on social media. Most people do that these days, but I think the missing element for a lot of people is when you have a message that you want to get out there, a little bit of a paid amplification of that post that you put out, the PR release that you've posted onto your website and then posted onto socials. You put a couple of $100 behind it, and then all of a sudden 20, 30, 50,000 people are seeing it, and that sort of allows you to control the narrative, control your own message, which obviously when you're only putting it on your website, there might not be too many people going there. It's not going to get too many eyeballs on it. But if you can then use that sort of advertising side of things and social media to get as many people out there as possible to read it as you can, then yeah, obviously that's going to improve your PR outcomes.
And likewise, another metric would be looking at your website visitations that have been achieved as a result of that amplification of your messaging. So people obviously, it demonstrates there's been traction. They're looking for more information, wanting to get some more insights on the business or organisation, and so web traffic through Google Analytics is an important point to look at.
Yeah, and LinkedIn, you can do that on LinkedIn as well. That can be a part of that.
Yeah, so LinkedIn's one of the best opportunities in social media right now from an organic point of view. Any random Joe bloke can go out and create a profile and post a status update and potentially reach 20,000, 30,000 people, 100,000 people for nothing. That's probably not possible on channels like Facebook or Instagram now just because of the oversaturation. But LinkedIn, just kind of like TikTok, is a channel where there are more people on there consuming content than there are creating it, which means that if you do want to push out your PR messages, you get on LinkedIn, you post organically, sort of free channels, continue to update your messaging, get your message out there, and that's one way that you can sort of cost effectively really push whatever you want to push via PR.
And I guess that the takeaway message of that really is that all the content that you're making, if you're making a television commercial, if you've got a press ad, if you've got a media release around some PR, that's content, and that there will be a way to get that out in a paid campaign to reach an audience, to reach new audiences with your message.
Yeah, certainly content is king, as they say, and once you've got content in one form or another, sometimes it's just a simple matter of massaging it to the format that best suits the media that you want to put it out on. And so once you've got the substance of content, you can then select the channels you want to put it out on, which, and those channels can be selected based on what you think your target audiences are engaging through.
This has been really good conversation. I want you to sort of look a little bit into the future here. I'm going to put you both on the spot again. Particularly, I'll start with you, Craig. The change that you've seen, and I will say that I've known Craig for 15 plus years, and we used to talk about traditional marketing a lot when we used to see each other at functions. But we've blended in digital and social channels. Where do you see it going with catch-up TV? The talk of newspapers falling over. Where do you see it going, Craig? Have you got a sense?
Good question, Adrian.
I told you I was putting you on the spot.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. Look, I don't think traditional media is dead by any stretch, for the medium term anyway. And partly because there's still a significant demographic out there, which you'd probably call pre-baby boomers. So I think they call them veterans, who are not as comfortable with digital and social as younger generations, and so that's where traditional media certainly hits the mark. And big advertisers like McDonald's, they're still doing billboards for a cup of coffee because they know that those people, that's the way they consume their media. While it's also reinforcing to those who consume digital and social media, the billboards are reinforcing that message. Certainly, there's a component of the audience out there that's the only way they get the message. So traditional media certainly isn't dead. It's probably, like I said at the outset, stagnating compared to digital and social. And I think they're finding ways, those traditional media owners, to integrate and get a piece of that digital and social pie. You have to look at News Corp, for example. They have the News Extend product. There's Win Television. They have their Win Digital. So these guys, they recognise to a degree the writings on the wall. So I think when I say stagnate, it'll probably start to maybe even diminish, and are starting to make those formative moves into the digital and social realm, because they know that's where the future is. And I only have to look at my kids, and at their age, I might have been watching a bit of telly after school. It's all YouTube now. It's all digital and social stuff. Everything's on YouTube. Television's probably not even on their radar. And so if that's the future, then television's probably, I'd probably say television's the most at risk in terms of being severely affected by audience numbers. And as a result, that should make it a cheaper media, but certainly less eyeballs.
Yeah. And look, full disclosure, Cor Comms also has 3 community newspapers that we deliver into the city of Hobart, and they're going really strongly. Like, people still want to be able to find out what's going on at the over their fence, and
there's no doubt that community media community news is something that's not readily available online. People can get national news, they can get international news all online, so they don't necessarily need to go and buy a newspaper. But it's not often that you can find what's going on down the street in terms of when's that new playground being built or what roadworks are happening around the corner. And so that's where community newspapers come into their own, and people have a bit of a sticky beak mentality, so they want to know what's happening in and around them. And there's no doubt that there's probably a skew towards an older readership. They're probably a little bit more community focused and perhaps have the time to read these publications, but certainly nonetheless there's still plenty of engagement with them.
And so, Trent, we've just we've determined that traditional media isn't dead, which is great. But so where do you see it going? Things like TikTok and Snapchat, and they're things that we can weave into a campaign of ours from time to time. But are they going to get more prevalent as Craig watches his kids and I watch my kids, and the way they're consuming? If you ask them to post something on Facebook about something, you're the worst person in the world because it's embarrassing. How do you see that world changing, and how do you see advertisers being able to take those opportunities?
One of the interesting points about it is, I guess, that these channels like TikTok and LinkedIn, they are advertising channels. They can be used as marketing channels, but they're also free in a way. So at the moment, the Facebook and Instagram product, the free version of it, potentially isn't as good as TikTok or LinkedIn. So from one point of view, some social media people would tell you to be on those channels, but from the paid advertising point of view, the Facebook product is just so sophisticated and capable of doing so many things that it probably doesn't have a competitor, and the one competitor it bought, which was Instagram. So like from that point of view, TikTok has quite a long way to go. But in the early stages, I will say that I see some TikTok ads, and the thing that I mentioned before in terms of integrating or blending in with the news feed, TikTok achieves that really well. You scroll through the feed, you stop on an ad, you don't even realise an ad until halfway through, and they're pushing a product on you. Like, it's really effective. So the early stages, they're doing a great job of making the ad product something that's going to be consumable, which is good. But from we talked about the pixels, we talked about custom audiences, we talked about all the different sophisticated little mechanisms that Facebook has. And I think that, anyone else that jumps into the market at the moment from an advertising perspective, they've got quite a long way to go, and Facebook continues to innovate. So still a little bit of life left in it, I think.
It's interesting you mentioned the sophistication of Facebook and the attractiveness it is for advertisers, because Facebook really have, obviously they're looking to drive revenue. So people who are serving organically, we've recognised over time they've delivered that to less and less of their audiences. So followers or likers or whatever you would like to call them are receiving less and less of an organic post, and that's partly to drive their advertising part of the business.
And that's, the message to CEOs out there and, general managers is that, the marketing people know this, and they, it's not about just posting stuff. You
can't be content with just posting on your organic channels and thinking you're going to reach everyone who follows you, or they're going to share it and it's going to go a lot broader, because what you probably find is it actually goes less than goes to less numbers than you have followers.
And what speaks to the business model of Facebook is that, and what we would say as marketers is that you've got this great asset now. You've done this great post. You've taken a lot of time to get the photo of so-and-so in your shop holding this new product. Put some money behind it and reach a new audience. And that's how Facebook would make their money.
Yeah, and that's why they formulated that approach in terms of restricting what you can deliver organically, just so that people, that's the only decision you can make if you want to use that platform to extend it further.
Yeah.
I will say though, I think the one area where Facebook's made a mistake in that is that when they do restrict the reach of a post, their sort of first point of call is to tell people to boost it. And I think we know that boosting is sort of a much more ineffective method than Facebook paid ads. So a lot of people, I think, have tried boosting ads. They've put a couple of $100 behind a post and they haven't seen the success, because the boosting of a post doesn't allow you to control as many factors like the target audiences or the placements or things that actual advertising through Business Manager does. So that's one area where I think Facebook, by making it easy for people to boost posts and put money behind it, they've kind of actually maybe shot themselves in the foot a little bit, because people aren't seeing the results from a boost that they would from a paid ad if they actually push people to run ads that way.
It's certainly one of those things that raises my hackles, is when you're talking to somebody and we've boosted it on Facebook. I always sort of recoil a little bit because we know that it's just not as effective. And I wonder, Trent, to your point there, is that just sort of easy money for Facebook? To know that these people don't have a lot of knowledge in marketing and advertising, and so they'll put some money to it. It won't really go anywhere, but they're not going to leave the platform either. So which I guess is a reason why we have people like Craig and Trent in the world who can actually put some strategy behind it, particularly when you're mixing it with traditional. And we know, as we've been discussing, traditional still works. So it's about getting that value for money across those, keeping that campaign going longer, and filling in those gaps with some cheaper digital or social, whilst you can't afford to pay for the TVC, or you've got the ads in the newspaper. We're going to wrap up shortly, but I want to, and I think I know the answer to some of these, but I just want to know what your top takeaways are for this. Trent, have you got 2 takeaways from our discussion today?
Yeah, I think the most important one obviously is just being contextual, audience focused content. So when you're running ads, or even if you're posting on social media, you just need to make sure that you're doing it with the audience in mind, and you're making sure that it's applicable or suitable for the platform that you're posting on. And that applies for organic posting or paid ads. It's just really important that you keep those things in mind. And I think the other thing is that the integration of traditional and social media is it's quite effective, and it's here. There are methods that people maybe aren't quite sure of. A lot of people, I think, manage these advertising channels in isolation from each other. But like we mentioned, there are things like traditional media goes out and you track your Google Analytics and see the web visitors, and you kind of track those two together. You drive people with traditional media to your website, and then they're captured with a pixel, and then they're followed up. So I think being able to consider how the whole marketing mix works in one is another really important factor that I think people need to take away from this.
Yeah, that integrated approach, as we know, is the most effective. And, I suppose a key takeaway from my point of view is, yes, traditional is not dead, but you have to make sure that you're leveraging that traditional. Because if you're spending a lot of money on TV and predominantly people are driving traffic to their website as a result of that, then you're missing a great opportunity if you don't have a pixel on your website that captures that data. And while you may not be doing a Facebook campaign now, that data's there forever and a day that you can then leverage at some point if you do a social media campaign. So it really is kind of, when you at the outset, when you're thinking about campaigns, is recognising that funnel, as we like to call it, and really getting the most out of that traditional media spend by having a pixel on your website.
Great. Well, guys, thanks very much for joining us today for the Core of the Matter, talking about the mixing of traditional and digital marketing. It's been a really interesting chat, and I hope the people listening and watching are going to get something out of it, because I learnt stuff, and I've been doing this for a fair while myself. So that's Cor Comms Marketing Director Craig Harding and Digital Media Specialist Trent Arnold. Jump onto our Core of the Matter page at corcomms.com.au/podcast for links used in the making of this program. The Core of the Matter is produced by Cor Comms, based in Hobart, Tasmania. Join us on our social media channels on Facebook and Instagram. You can find the links on our website at corcomms.com.au. Leave us a message or tell us what you think of our podcast if you've got any ideas as to what we can cover next time. I'm Adrian Smith. Until next time, harness your passion and be a nice human.